Well, I think it's time that I make the video that every sim racing person makes after they get a direct drive upgrade. Is the upgrade worth it? If you follow me on any other form of social media, which you should follow my Twitch, by the way, because I do a bunch of community races that you can get involved in, and I also stream a bunch of league racing events, and overall it's a really good time. I'd love to see you over there. Link in the description. Anyway, if you do follow me on any other form of social media, you'd have known that a couple weeks ago I recently got an Accuforce V2, which is sat right over there, actually. Lately I've been getting a lot of direct messages and chats asking what I think about the direct drive after having it for a short period of time. So I thought I'd make a video about what I like and what I don't like about a direct drive and whether or not it would be a good upgrade for you. Yeah, so I got this wheel about 2 weeks ago, and I couldn't initially put it on my rig because my rig wasn't strong enough to hold it, so I had to live with seeing it sit just in the corner for... It was only a couple days, so it wasn't too bad, but the rim that I got for it, it was sitting right next to my rig for about 2 weeks before I actually got the base, so that was a bit torturous. But once I finally got everything together and fired up ACC for the first time, my first thought was, wow, I'm gonna need to work out for this. You see, before I had this wheel, I was using a Thrustmaster TMX, which is one of the most entry-level wheels you can get. So jumping from a wheel that was extremely basic to a professional, quote-unquote, grade wheel was a massive jump. That Thrustmaster I was using before, though, was a fantastic wheel. The reason I upgraded is because I wanted a little bit more immersion, and this is sort of my job, and I feel like this helps me do my job better, so that's my way of justifying it to myself. So the answer to the all-important question, is a direct drive worth upgrading to? I think is a no-brainer, but everybody's in a different situation, so I want to go over the pros and cons of owning a direct drive wheel to help maybe give you a little insight as to whether you want to upgrade or not. So, pros of having a direct drive wheel. Originally I was going to have the first two pros as two separate things, but I think grouping them together would be a better idea because they kind of go hand in hand, for me at least, which is just more immersion. The subcategories would be better force feedback and fun, because for me, having things feel a lot more realistic is much more fun, personally. It may be different for you, and I think fun is a bit self-explanatory. The better force feedback thing, though, I'm dead serious when I tell you this, the first time I did a lap on this new wheel, my mind was absolutely blown. I had no idea the amount of detail that was of force feedback that was there. I had no idea that could even be conveyed through a sim. Originally I was on that Thrustmaster TMX, and going from that to the direct drive, it was a bit like trying to read a book underwater in a murky lake to having perfect 20/20 vision and using a magnifying glass to help you. It's just astonishing. I know I have a very monotonal voice, but I hope it conveys some sincerity of how amazed I was at how much I could feel. Now, my first eye-opening experience, I guess is the best way to say it, was when I drove the Ferrari at Silverstone in ACC. The Ferrari is pretty notorious for having really weird force feedback, but I can feel the same sensation in other cars, so I know it's not just narrowed down to the Ferrari, but I could feel the tires when you're going through like Maggots, Beckett's, or Stowe, for example, and I could just feel the tires load up and get to the edge of their limit. I have never in my entire life of sim racing, which is granted only like 7 months, I have never ever felt the edge of a tire's grip. I've only felt you have grip and then you don't. I think I rambled on quite a bit about that better force feedback thing, but trust me, if you've never driven a direct drive and you think you understand what it's gonna feel like, you don't. I was in that same boat. My mind was still blown. Now, my second pro for having a direct drive wheel was being able to use different rims. Now, I'm sure a lot of you know this if you're researching direct drives, but the majority of them have 70mm or 50mm quick release mounts, with Fanatec being the exception. Now, that same type of mounting system, it's a bit different in an actual car, but they are kind of found in some cars. Now, because of that 70mm mount, you have the option to be able to go for a wheel that you might find in an actual car, so like a Momo 300mm circular rim or something. Or you can go the more custom route and get a custom-made wheel that's either 3D printed or molded, which is what I did. I'm trying to hold this up not too awkwardly, but this is my Ferrari 488 GT3 replica. I don't think it's branded as a replica, but I call it a replica. Rim from 3D Wrap. The whole front of it is carbon fiber, the rear of it's carbon fiber, and the rest of it's 3D printed. And because you have that 70mm mount, you can go for any combination you want. And I personally just love that freedom of stuff you can get, and you kind of put your own personality on your rig. Now, just because most of the non-direct drive wheels don't have that 70mm mount, that doesn't mean you can't customize your rim. This is the rim that I used to use on my Thrustmaster TMX. It's fully 3D printed, so it's not super durable, but it does get the job done. But what's cool about 3D printing now is you can literally just 3D print a mount for anything, so you really kind of still have the same options as a direct drive would, but not nearly as many. Now for my third pro, it helps improve your consistency on track. Now, I know saying that you won't get faster from getting new equipment is kind of like beating a dead horse, but for me, using this direct drive, I was initially slower because it was something I wasn't used to. When I say slower, I mean I was 2 seconds a lap slower. But once I got used to it, I was so much more consistent with my lap times than I was on the TMX. I think strictly because I could actually feel what the car was doing instead of kind of having to guess and react visually to what the car was saying. On a side note, my first special event with the direct drive was Petit Le Mans on iRacing, and I had to do like 2-hour stints. I can tell you, you will get buff using this. So moving on to cons of having a direct drive wheel, or why you may not want to go the direct drive route. For the first con, a direct drive really isn't plug and play like a normal Thrustmaster or Logitech wheel is. Granted, I did just plug in the USB cable and I was able to fire up ACC and I saw the game recognized it, but it was a bit of a different story in R Factor 2. I had a hell of a time trying to get that game to even recognize that this wheel even existed. And if you want to get really detailed with force feedback tweaking and everything, usually these wheel companies have some sort of software to handle that. Now the software that Accuforce uses, which is the same Commander 4, it is pretty intuitive and it doesn't take that much time to learn, but it is something that you do gotta learn, and if you're someone who doesn't have a whole lot of time to race every day or every other day, it may be a bit annoying once you get everything set up that you find out you have to go through another software to tweak force feedback settings. Now the third con is cost. These things cost a lot. The Accuforce is arguably one of the cheapest direct drive options, being actually on price with Fanatec's Clubsport V2.5, which is a belt-driven wheel. But the Accuforce bundle with a rim and quick release provided from Accuforce is $1,000. Now that does sound like a lot just for a steering wheel for a video game, but the wheels from Simicube, for example, which used to be the OSW wheels, the cheapest option from them is $1,500 US. That's a bit more expensive and it doesn't include a wheel or a quick release. And their top model goes for almost $3,800 US. It gets pretty steep. Granted, they do aim that top dollar wheel at professional racers and teams to use in their full-blown simulators. Of course, because most of these direct drives don't come with rims, you're gonna have to spend more money on rims, and that's my next kind of half to this con, where you kind of have to spend a lot more money to get a complete wheel. Now, it's been pointed out in multiple videos before where the cost of entry for direct drive has just been falling lower and lower. Case in point is that the Accuforce that comes with a wheel and a quick release is the same exact price as a Clubsport V2.5 with a Forza Motorsport rim from Fanatec, that being a belt drive wheel. I think wheel companies like Sim Experience, and even VRS with their direct drive that's just came out, I think this competition is really going to be dropping the price of entry for direct drives, and I think it's going to make it a lot more accessible for everybody, which hopefully, that would be awesome to have more people on direct drives. For my last and final con that I can come up with, a direct drive needs a pretty beefy rig. These aren't your typical TMX wheels where you can just clamp it to your IKEA desk and be off to the races, pun intended. Just the weight of my wheelbase alone, not even powered on, would probably snap my IKEA desk. Luckily, my father's a metal worker and he and I put together an all-steel rig, which is probably rusting by now. If we had it on the rig I had before, which is another homemade rig, we took an old rowing machine and strapped a racing seat to it. But if the direct drive was on that, I'm convinced it would have broke. And that kind of ties into my point really early on in the video. These things put out a lot more power than you think. Trust me, they do. It's a blessing and a curse. You'll see a lot of other people running direct drives running 80/20 rigs, but there's also some wheel stands, not full rigs, that support direct drives, so there's a lot of options out there to make sure your direct drive doesn't yeet your furniture into the next dimension. You don't necessarily need the beefiest rig in the world, you just gotta make sure it doesn't flex and snap in half. And with that, concludes my pros and cons list. For me, I think it's a no-brainer to upgrade to it, but for you it may be a bit different, and I hope this video helps you come to a decision if you're trying to make a decision. If you're not trying to make a decision, I hope your day's going good. Take care of yourself, okay? Even if you are trying to make a decision, I hope you also have a good day, and I hope you also take care of yourself. Please hydrate, please drink water, and get enough sleep tonight. Okay, bye.